Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Republican People's Party, CHP, held its 36th Ordinary Congress on Saturday.
Main opposition, Republican People's Party, CHP, held its 36th Ordinary Congress in Ankara on Saturday, February 3rd. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was re-elected for a fifth term as the party's chair. 790 votes were cast for Kılıçdaroğlu, while his opponent Muharrem İnce got 447 votes in total. 13 delegates abstained from voting. İnce had also run for leadership against Kılıçdaroğlu in the party's 2014 Congress. Earlier in the day, confusion broke out in the Congress as 49 delegates backed both Kılıçdaroğlu and İnce, putting İnce's nomination at risk. Former Istanbul Bar Association head Ümit Kocasakal and Ömer Faruk Eminağoğlu, the former head of the Judges and Prosecutors Association Yarsav, had also announced their candidacies for the party chairmanship but were not able to collect the required number of signatures. Following his re-election as leader, Kılıçdaroğlu said he did not expect his new term to be easy. Our struggle is the struggle of 80 million, the struggle for Turkey's future. We have to advance democracy. This is our main duty and we owe it to this nation, he said. Defeated candidate İnce, on the other hand, said he would continue his righteous struggle. We are present on the street, in the party organization, in the grassroots, in the hearts, he tweeted on Sunday. Meanwhile, CHP İzmir Deputy Selin Sayek Böke and Istanbul MP İlhan Cihaner published a manifesto titled Us for the Future shortly before their party's Congress. The manifesto stated that the Congress must not be reduced to a change of the chairperson and a race over the number of delegates, and added that the party must not shrink from standing on the opposing front to political Islam and neoliberalism. The manifesto makes an open call to Congress delegates, party members, and the general public, and states that the CHP, which is the largest organized force and leader of the social opposition, must organize an extraordinary opposition that does not normalize the permanent state of emergency regime and legitimize the illegitimate and accords with the extraordinary conditions.
Joining us from Ankara tonight is Selin Sayek Böke, who is a member of the Turkish Parliament with the Republican People's Party, CHP. Good evening, Mrs. Böke. Welcome once again to This Week in Turkey. There's been a problem with our Skype connection, so we will have to hold on. Although I think the problem has been solved. Mrs. Böke, welcome to This Week in Turkey. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So, Mrs. Böke, along with Istanbul MP İlhan Cihaner, you published a manifesto titled Us for the Future shortly before your party's Congress last weekend. And this manifesto opens with the following sentences. Despite all the darkness, hope remains at the door. This open call of ours is precisely to establish this hope-filled future. Mrs. Böke, what motivated you to publish this manifesto at this time?
Actually, the motivation is clearly set in that first sentence you just read out. It is true that Turkey is going through a very dark period. We have an amazing bundle of problems, and it's very difficult to identify them individually. However, we are very much aware that this extraordinary situation we're experiencing right now also bears an amazing opportunity that's standing at our doorsteps. And the opportunity is that the entrenched, if you wish, inequalities, the extent of injustices that are experienced in Turkey is creating a ground for mobilizing the larger public, this dissent, around a political cause, which would actually help remedy much of these extraordinary issues in Turkey and carry Turkey towards a normalization. So the reason we made this open call to the larger public, and indeed to an internal part of our party, is because we believe in a bright future of Turkey. We know the potential and the strength of Turkey, and we know that if we were to mobilize these progressive millions in Turkey around a political cause, then Turkey would be able to build that bright future starting today. So I think part of it is we know that potential. And the second reason we actually decided to make this open call and draft such a manifesto is our party congress happened this past weekend. And indeed, party congresses are natural platforms where ideology is discussed, where a future political and policy path is debated and formulated for political parties. And unfortunately, we realized that up until our declaration, up until our open call, much of the debate was diminished, if you wish, minimized into one of personalizing the discussion, the political discussion around party leader candidates, or delegate numbers, or if you wish, a personal loyalty. Rather, we strongly believe that Turkish politics, as well as CHP politics, much needs a discussion of an ideology, a clear mindset, a clear set of political values and policies that would actually shape the future. So 10 days before the Congress, such a call was actually much needed. So if you wish, both on behalf of what is needed in Turkey and what is demanded by the larger public opposition in Turkey, as well as what CHP needs, because CHP stands the largest, if you wish, duty and responsibility in ensuring that as the one largest political entity that's able to mobilize the public, we stand the duty of indeed doing this. Therefore, the call for Turkey has to go through a call to CHP, where CHP changes its politics, where CHP actually starts debating a clear political framework that depends on a clear set of values that are our values and that actually represent Turkey's values. So it's also, so it's both a need as well as a demand from the larger public. And the demand is evident. I'm sure we'll talk of this in a few seconds. But the demand is evident in many of the activities we've seen in the past, which started with Gezi, which we saw during the no camp of the referendum, which we saw during the Justice March. So we actually became the voice of this much needed and demanded politics, if you wish, and change.
And should this manifesto be seen perhaps as a challenge or a confrontation even against the current CHP administration?
I would say clearly it bears in it objections to past steps that have been taken. So yes, we disagree with much of the administrative decisions and political decisions that have been taken, and we realize the need for deep change and the urge and the urgency for change. So if you wish, this manifesto, an open call, is one for change. Therefore, it refutes the status quo that we are experiencing. And indeed, this is not a personal quest for change. It's indeed, we are just a medium or a voice for the change that is demanded by the larger public, which we saw, as I said, during Gezi, which we saw, as I said, during the No campaign, and most clearly, which we saw during the evening of the 16th of April, when the illegitimate outcome was indeed imposed onto the larger public, and the larger public demanded that CHP not legitimize this illegitimate outcome and do whatever is necessary to ensure that the referendum results actually prevail as the no that was indeed evident in the votes. So the larger public's voice is what we are being a medium for within the party. That's why I think it's clearly one that challenges the status quo, one that demands change, and one that is showing the willpower to be and do that change.
And let's now try to make sense of the profile of this movement for change. As you put it, who are you and how many are you? Who is with you within the party, and how would you describe your base?
We are the voice of millions in Turkey, and clearly this is evident in the amazing popular support we got in a sheer 2 weeks period. Tomorrow it's going to be 2 weeks since we actually came out with this declaration, and we've had a flood of support from the larger public. What's as important as this is that we also now know that our party delegation also clearly supports this idea, which is evident, or this demand for change, which is evident in the votes that we as a group have received. So the representation of this larger millions right now for the party congress, we decided that we would actually have 5 candidates to represent this movement during the elections. And of the 5 candidates that were actually on the ballot list for the party congress, 4 of us were in the first 52. And right now, 3 of us are actually representing this movement, this politics, this change in the party congress that's been formulated. So if you wish, we are very crowded, and we refute the idea of viewing politics through the lens of the question of who. Rather, the question should be a question of what. And we have clearly put forth a roadmap of what we think Turkey needs and what this means for the politics of CHP. And for us, it's not the people who, or the number of people that matter, but it's rather what we represent and the values we hope to carry into politics in a much clearer, stronger, and determined fashion. So we represent the millions in Turkey who have said no. We represent the millions in Turkey who were very unhappy on the evening of the 16th when the illegitimate outcome was imposed and CHP was unable to mobilize the larger public. We are the voice and representatives of those who marched hundreds of kilometers for justice. So we actually represent the larger society who cares to live in unison and to decide on a society contract, if you wish, that is driven not by a personalized politics, but one that's driven by the values that are going to keep us unison and unity for the future.
And now let's focus on the content of your manifesto for a little bit. The first and most central point in the text of your manifesto holds that extraordinary conditions have intensified in Turkey and that, I quote, "The CHP must end its position of continuing its fight inside the parliament by way of ordinary period legislative activity." Can you elaborate on this? What sort of extraordinary activity do you hope to accomplish?
First and foremost, I think to formulate a proper politics, you have to define the conditions that you wish to change. Therefore, if you're going to formulate the right politics, you have to make sure that you understand what conditions you're fighting against or wish to change. So the first thing CHP has to do is realize and accept that we are living through an extraordinary period. The parliament has been bypassed. Nearly half of the local governments are not represented by elected people, and we have imprisoned MPs. Therefore, representation is actually debilitated through an amazing regime that's being constructed. Therefore, I think we have to start by accepting it is an extraordinary period, which necessitates, therefore, extraordinary opposition and instruments to be used. Now, the nature of these extraordinary opposition clearly is not something that's unknown to Turkey. Indeed, it's no different than the no camp. Right? Despite all the resources of the government being used to create oppression and repression, millions in Turkey campaigned for no by indeed becoming the grassroots mobilization of a democratic force. So we have observed that under extraordinary conditions, under extraordinary repression, millions in Turkey took democracy to their heart and indeed made it operational through a campaign, despite and maybe by keeping political parties at the background, or the Justice March, right? Despite all the fear and repression that's being created by the state and all the amenities used by the regime itself, people actually contributed to the march. And each step that was taken in that march had an amplified effect because it meant a growing group of people who participated in this. So extraordinary measures are actually taken by the people where they don't fear the oppression. They don't take the oppression as a limiting factor. So for a political party, extraordinary measures or opposition is nothing but to include the larger public who's ready to be included in such a democratic struggle and fight, and to indeed not only wait for them to do it, but take the lead and reshape the larger public's common objective of the future. So I think here the extraordinary nature of opposition not only includes the different means that you could use, which is clearly, that includes democratic forces beyond the four walls of the parliament, but also makes sure that when you're using the parliament as a floor for opposition, you accept the fact that that's no longer an area where you're able to do your proper duties. So yes, it should remain in the parliament, but it should not remain as if everything is normal, but we should carry politics outside the walls of that parliament and combine it, our strength, if you wish, with the larger public who is already taking these extraordinary measures despite all the amazing pressure that they're facing. The second difference, I think, is that we should put a positive future objective that we can convene the larger public around. And this can only happen through the values that we know people are ready to keep alive. To keep in mind, despite all the amazing politics that is imposed through the regime and the palace onto the larger public, people are holding on to secularism. People are holding on to the values of Atatürk's revolutionary and modernization story. Therefore, it's our duty to ensure we support these people and indeed lead them in the fight they're putting up to holding on to these values that actually make up Turkey and the values that actually CHP naturally represents and should be the lead force in making this the politics for Turkey.
Your responses so far suggest that you have observed that your goals and objectives and motivations already resonate with your voter base and perhaps the wider general public. And do you think these goals and this manifesto in particular resonated with the delegates at your party's Congress as well?
Yes, I think maybe we should put forth the following. Today, the zeitgeist of today, if you wish, and not just specific to Turkey, is one where people are demanding equality more and more. Because repression and oppression, democratically, economically, socially, and politically, is so widespread worldwide that you indeed are observing this 1% versus 99% inequality clearly in Turkey as well as globally. Therefore, the 99% is ready to mobilize around the values that will bring equality to force, the values that will bring freedom to force, the values that will ensure secularism to force, the values of peace becoming the major part of politics, if you wish, and the future objective that we frame. So this has resonated strongly with the larger public because we are only the voice of them right now. And we are ready to lead their struggle into one of victory and a change of track for Turkey. And we have observed the same and strong support from our delegates. So as representatives of this movement, we have received one of the largest votes of our delegates in this party Congress. So I think it is proof that the demand for change is not limited to the larger public, but the party is also ready for change. However, when you look at the general outcome that we observe in the party Congress, amidst this hopeful story that we are experiencing and representing, unfortunately, we're able to say that the administration's attitude, politics, will dramatically change on account of the overall result. This is to suggest our struggle, our democratic quest, has only just started. And the reason we know this start is a strong one is because of the popular support as well as the delegation support we received. So we will continue to ensure that this political fight is put up, that we represent this fight both within the party assembly, but more importantly, continue to work with the larger public and make this a grassroots movement that becomes one that's permanent, sustainable, and unbreakable because it's a grassroots movement.
And now that the Congress is over, what are the next steps ahead? What should your supporters expect from you and your group?
They should expect us to actually act the words that we spoke. As you know, we had 4 items that defined the framework of politics, right? One is we realize that the conditions in Turkey are extraordinary. Therefore, we will not keep on as if things are normal. We're going to do everything in our means and use every democratic instrument that we have and legal instrument that we have to put up a fight against a regime that is creating darkness and dire situations in Turkey. So you will see us both in the parliament, more importantly, outside the parliament, working with the society, creating public opposition and leading the public opposition in our acts as well as our words. Secondly, we clearly identified in our manifesto that one issue that we are lacking in the party right now is clarity, is self-confidence, is determination. We seem to be influenced heavily by what AKP and the governing structure seems to impose onto us. All right, tell us it's a nationhood issue. The conjuncture won't allow you to speak this. This is not the right time to do so. Whereas we know that what's important is that you do the right thing that you know. That depends on the values you know are much needed and the values you know you represent. Therefore, a self-confident, determined, clear strategy of politics that relies on your own values is clearly one that's a candidate to grow naturally. Right now, one issue we're observing is, if you think of politics as a pyramid, both within the party and for Turkey, the pyramid of politics seems to be in reverse order. Things are working through leaders and a personification of politics. Whereas we wish to change that order and create a pyramid that grows from the grassroots and where leaders are an outcome of a politics that's driven by the grassroots values, the grassroots policy choices, and the grassroots politics that actually prevails. So we will be the driving force and a participant at times of this grassroots movement, and we will be the medium that carries that into the political party and hopefully grow it within the political party of CHP and indeed create change for Turkey. So a clear objective of ours is to be inclusive and know that inclusiveness in parties like ours should not fall into the trap of lack of ideology and depoliticization, right? It has to be based on a clarity of your ideology. And today, we know that the clear ideology that we need is one that depends on universal left values, one that has the determination of Atatürk's revolutionary reforms. Therefore, a combination of these that read the global order properly, that reads the conditions in Turkey properly, and frankly, is able to formulate a strong social democratic program with an organization that will overcome the fascist dictatorship, if you wish, we are facing. So a grassroots movement with universal left values, a determination of Atatürk's revolution, and reforms of Atatürk that we know were much, indeed, the strength of Turkey being implemented to the conditions of today. So we know the recipe. All we have to do is mobilize the larger public.
Mrs. Böke, do you think your group is likely to face challenges within the decision-making structures and processes of your party?
We never thought of this as a challenge. Indeed, we have the will to change that. This is why I said we are happy that we are elected into the party assembly, but we have been very critical of the misuse of power, if you wish, in these party assemblies and organs. Unfortunately, they have not been operationalized at the fair extent that they should be. So we know of the limitations. We will continue to push the limits within the party to ensure that the party organs are fully operationalized. But we realize that our political and democratic quest cannot be limited to a fight within the party assembly. That's only an instrument to ensure that your politics becomes the core of Turkey in the future. Just like you said, for Turkey, our political and democratic quest cannot be limited within the 4 walls of the parliament, but should be carried outside the parliament. we think of the same thing for our within the party quest for this democratic change. We will not be intimidated by the difficulties and the challenges we will face. Clearly, they are there. However, we will continue to push the frontiers within the party, within our domain of duties. But more importantly, we will carry out our politics together with the grassroots, together with the larger public, and indeed make that a force of change within the party.
Mm-hmm. And before we start wrapping up, how would you and your group describe the profile of the ideal candidate for 2019?
First and foremost, we think discussing 2019 through the lens of candidates is a huge trap that we should not fall into. 2019 is not a normal election. It's actually a referendum of whether or not Turkey will go back into maybe improved parliamentary and democratic system, or whether Turkey will be lost into a one-man ruling dictatorialship. So it's a referendum. Therefore, a referendum cannot be diminished into a debate or personification through candidates. Rather, it should be one where we are able to mobilize the larger public around the common values that we want to live together with. We saw this succeed in the No campaign, right? The 16th of April referendum outcome was actually one of no, where people held on to parliamentarian democracy, where they said, we all realize that we might have our heterogeneities and differences, but these differences can only live together and create a unity if we have a true democracy. So people held on to the value of democracy. We saw that people are willing to come around the value of justice. So it's our duty to speak of these core values that the society is going to live together around, rather than speak of the candidate. A candidate is a natural outcome of such a grassroots politics that is driven through values. So if we define our values clearly, which CHP has to do, and we are able to convey these with a persistent, determined, self-confident manner with the larger public, I have no doubt that not only will Turkey hold on to parliamentarian democracy, but CHP will be able to grow and become the major party that actually leads Turkey into that bright future. Because a self-confident, self-determined, and persistent politics that's driven through the values that brought together Turkey, which we saw in the No camp, which we saw in the Justice March, which we saw at the Gezi movement, is one that is a clear roadmap for the future. So it's not the candidate. The candidate, it should be a natural outcome of a process. It's actually the process that matters, and that process has to be one that's driven by political values, the societal values that we're going to write our contract on. And people have already told us what these are. Again, equality, freedom, secularism, democracy, and peace are the core values that define what Turkey needs and what is demanded by the larger public from us. And clearly, if we're going to name these values, these are universal left values. So we have to first and foremost overcome this idea that the larger public in Turkey is conservative, is right-wing, therefore we should not speak of the left. However, what we're observing in those who are deeply hurt by this neoliberal system is they are unhappy because they have to work 14 hours rather than 8 hours. They are unhappy because the minimum wage is close to poverty line. They are unhappy because they are unable to have an equal opportunity, well-defined, rational, scientific education for their kids. The young are unhappy because they don't have the freedom to think and create. So we know that these injustices and inequalities that we observe economically and socially are an outcome of this neoliberal system and the crony capitalism. So we should be able to mobilize the larger society around the values of equality, around a demand for an equal economic system, an equal social system. And we should not be confined to the idea that Turkey would not accept these values, which are clearly social democratic, universal left values. So again, I have full confidence that the candidate will be a natural outcome that represents these values. The Atatürk's revolutionary reforms that are carried today, as well as the universal left values, social democratic values that are much demanded and needed by millions in Turkey. The candidate is an outcome.
You made it very clear that you and your group would rather refrain from focusing on individuals as candidates. But with your permission, my final question to you will be the following. Would you consider running as a presidential candidate in 2019 if your party made such a proposal?
First, let me state, in a true democracy, press members should not ask for permission. So therefore, I'm happy that you're able to ask any question that comes to your mind. But again, the very nature of our approach actually refutes this question as being central to our politics. We care to speak of values, and we never actually will take any step back if there is a demand for us to take on duties. None of us would do so. However, right now for us, the critical political statement and act has to be one where we keep focus on these values, where we keep focus on building up that social contract in Turkey. The candidate is, for us right now, quite very much a secondary issue.
Selin Sayek Böke, thank you very much for your comments and for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
People's Democratic Party, HDP, is set to hold its third ordinary Congress on Sunday.
People's Democratic Party, HDP's third ordinary Congress is scheduled to take place this Sunday. HDP's Istanbul legislator Pervin Buldan and deputy co-chair Sezai Temelli have been nominated as prospective co-chairs in the party's upcoming Congress. Incumbent HDP co-chair Serpil Kemalbay said during a press conference in Ankara on Thursday. A consensus commission set up to pick co-chair candidates had already selected Buldan to replace jailed co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş, who has been accused of various terrorist activities and who has already declared he would not nominate himself for the party's leadership. Pervin Buldan, who is considered to be an experienced politician, has represented the province of Iğdır in the Turkish parliament for 2 terms and is the current deputy chair of the HDP. Sezai Temelli, a professor of economics dismissed from Istanbul University following an emergency decree, was elected as an Istanbul lawmaker in the June 2016 elections. However, Temelli failed to keep his seat in the snap elections held in November of the same year. On the other hand, Ferhat Encil lost his parliamentary seat as an HDP legislator after being convicted of terrorism charges on Tuesday. Deputy Parliament Speaker Yaşar Tüzün announced Encil's removal by showing lawmakers a letter from the Prime Minister's office showing Encil's conviction. According to the Turkish constitution, any conviction on terrorism charges prohibits parliamentary deputyship. Encil was arrested on November 6, 2016 and was sentenced to 4 years and 7 months on charges including terror propaganda on June 9, 2017. His appeal against the conviction was also rejected. Following Encil's removal, HDP now holds 52 seats in the 550-seat parliament. The ruling AKP holds 316 seats, and the main opposition CHP has 131 seats. On the way to the HDP Congress, some 500 members of the HDP have also been detained in the last 10 days, mainly due to their opposition to Operation Olive Branch. The Kurdish issue-focused HDP has been under pressure since the collapse of a peace process between the government and the PKK in the summer of 2015. Since the July 2016 coup attempt, a total of 7 HDP deputies have had their legislator status revoked, and dozens of municipalities previously run by the HDP have been replaced by Ankara-appointed administrations.
Turkey's military operation in Afrin continues.
Turkey's Operation Olive Branch continues on its 20th day. Turkey has resumed air attacks in the city of Afrin. Turkish state news agency reported on Friday that Turkish armed forces struck 19 targets overnight. According to the Turkish media, Ankara's aerial campaign was briefly halted after Russia closed the airspace over Afrin as a result of the downing of a Russian jet in neighboring Idlib province. Earlier in the week, a Russian Su-25 was shot down in a rebel-held area in Idlib, which resulted in the death of the pilot. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group formerly linked to Al-Qaeda, assumed responsibility for the attack. Since the beginning of the Operation Olive Branch, media reports suggest that an estimated 1,062 YPG militants and at least 20 Turkish soldiers have been killed. Meanwhile, clashes are also escalating in the town of Idlib. As a response to the downing of the Russian jet, Russian and Syrian jets bombed towns and villages across Idlib in the biggest air campaign on opposition-held area since the fall of Aleppo. A Turkish soldier was also killed in the same province one day later by a rebel attack. Following the attack, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced that he would expand Turkey's operation to Idlib after completing the current mission in Afrin. We want our Syrian brothers and sisters to return to their land, and now we want to do the same in Idlib, what we have done in Afrin, Erdogan said. Throughout the week, tension has also escalated between the pro-Assad forces and US-backed forces in eastern Syria. The US announced that it killed more than 100 pro-Assad forces in an attempt to repel an assault on a US-controlled base in eastern Syria. Pentagon spokeswoman told reporters that the Syrian Democratic Forces acted in self-defense with support from the coalition to defeat an unprovoked attack by Syrian pro-regime forces in eastern Syria. In response, the Syrian Foreign Ministry announced that it called upon the United Nations, demanding international condemnation of the US bombing attack. Heavy clashes also occurred between the Syrian government forces and US-backed SDG forces in the province of Deir ez-Zor.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Pope Francis in the Vatican City on Monday.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Pope Francis as part of his two-day visit to the Vatican City on Monday. Erdogan's visit was the first by a Turkish president to the Vatican in 59 years. Erdogan's delegation included Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, Economy Minister Nihat Zeybekçi, Defense Minister Nurettin Canikli, EU Minister Ömer Çelik, and Energy Minister Berat Albayrak. Erdogan and Pope Francis spoke about the situation in Turkey, the condition of the Catholic community, efforts to accommodate refugees, and the challenges linked to this, the Vatican said in a statement. Attention then turned to the situation in the Middle East, with particular reference to the status of Jerusalem, it added. In an interview published by Italian newspaper La Stampa, President Erdogan said the status of Jerusalem is a central issue for both Muslims and Christians. Both the Pope and myself are committed to protecting the status quo. Along with Erdogan, Pope Francis was among the prominent international leaders criticizing the United States' decision last December to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. After the 50-minute private meeting, the Pope gave President Erdogan a bronze medallion showing an angel embracing the world while battling a dragon. This is the angel of peace, who strangles the demon of war. It is a symbol of a world based on peace and justice, he told the president. Following his visit to the Vatican, Erdogan met his counterpart, Italian President Sergio Mattarella, at a working lunch in Rome. Italian Deputy Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni was also present at the meeting. During the meeting, the leaders discussed cooperation in various areas, including politics, economy, and the defense industry.
Former Ambassador Nabi Şensoy has died at the age of 73.
Nabi Şensoy, Turkey's former ambassador to the United States, passed away on Wednesday at the age of 73. Ambassador Şensoy had an impressive career at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In addition to high-ranking positions in Ankara, he served as the ambassador to Russia between 1998 and 2002, ambassador to Spain between 1990 to 1995, and ambassador to the United States between 2006 and 2009. He was also chief of staff to President Turgut Özal, consul general in London, and counselor at the Turkish embassy in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Şensoy was a graduate of the Faculty of Political Sciences at Ankara University.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.